I have been so impressed by the kindness that I've been shown here and the wonderful cooperation and organization of this conference. And human beings are capable of great kindness. This is a very good example of it, and great cooperation and great helpfulness, but they're also capable of terrible atrocities and wickedness. Atrocities like you see depicted on the screen, the bodies of dead Jews during the Holocaust. And this raises an interesting question for us. It presents us with a puzzle. How is it possible for these very same beings who are so cooperative and so kind and so loving, capable of all these things, what makes them capable of these sorts of acts, these acts of great cruelty and atrocity? Now, you might want to say, well, the people who perform actions like this are monsters or they're madmen. But the fact is, they are not. The people who perform these acts are ordinary people like you and me. So this deepens the puzzle we're confronted with. What makes it possible for ordinary people like you and me to do terrible, terrible things to others? Well, here's a clue. This is a passage from Bartolomé de las Casas' account of the conquest of the Americas. And as you'll see, Las Casas, Bishop of Chiapas, tells us that the Spaniards would kill Indians and hang bits of their bodies in butcher shops so that they could buy meat for their dogs. So they treated the Indians like subhuman animals. They treated them in the way that we would consider pigs and sheep and goats and cattle. This phenomenon is called dehumanization. Throughout history, we have found episodes of terrible violence, and a regular phenomenon that we find during these episodes of violence is that one group of people conceives of another group of people as though they were less than human, as though they were subhuman creatures. And this allows them to exclude these people from the universe of moral obligation. It allows them to perform actions which, if they did not regard them as subhuman, would be impossible psychologically to perform. We find this phenomenon in war, where the enemy is often depicted as a dangerous, bloodthirsty predator, as you see from this propaganda poster from World War II. We also find it in genocide, regularly in genocide. This is a German poster from World War II depicting the entire Jewish people as a monstrous parasite endangering the entire earth. And who wouldn't want to destroy such a parasite? You see, when we dehumanize people, we don't think of them just as any subhuman creature. We don't think of them as butterflies or kittens or puppies. We think of them as organisms that deserve killing, that merit killing, that it is our duty to kill, to harm, to destroy. Who wouldn't want to destroy a monstrous primate like you saw on the previous slide? Who wouldn't want to destroy a gigantic disease-carrying parasite enveloping the world? We find it in racism, where certain groups of people are considered not quite human. This is a depiction of an Irishman. Irishmen, by the way, were considered 100 years ago in Britain and the United States as black, oddly enough. And we find it in slavery. Slavery, dehumanizing people allows us to treat them as though they were beasts of burden, as pack animals, as creatures whose labor we can exploit without recompense. Now, I think you'll agree with me that this is a very serious matter. It's something which deserves to be understood. And on the face of it, it is very puzzling. Think of it for a moment. How could you manage to look at me and consider me as anything other than human? I stand on two legs, I have a human face, I speak, I wear clothing. Outwardly, I am indistinguishable from a human being. So what goes on in the minds of people when they dehumanize others that allows them to consider creatures that look like you and me as less than human? Well, the answer to that question is a little bit complicated, but I will do the best I can now to explain to you the essence of what goes on. We human beings have a deep psychological tendency to make a distinction between how things appear and how they really are deep inside. What something looks like and what makes it what it is. So we tend to think, for instance, wrongly in fact, that biological species like dogs, say, are dogs because they have this sort of inner dogginess. And we think of human beings as people because they possess an inner human essence. And it doesn't matter how they look, they can be deformed like the elephant man, but still possess a human essence that makes them human. Now, this is a very, very compelling idea. And when you start thinking in this way, then it occurs to you that the appearance of something and the essence of something can come apart. As we see in this example, gold and fool's gold, iron pyrite, they look very similar. They have a similar, almost indistinguishable appearance, but a very different essence. So what happens in dehumanization is this. We think of other people as having a human appearance, an appearance just like you and I, but inwardly being subhuman, having a subhuman essence, having the essence of a creature that is not only non-human, but is dangerous, deserves to be destroyed, and it is our moral duty to destroy. This is something which is desperately important for us to study. Why? Because if we look at the bloody history of humanity, we see this phenomenon emerging again and again and again and again. From ancient times, we find it in the writings of the ancient Chinese, the ancient Egyptians, the Babylonians, right through history to the terrible wars and genocides of the 20th century. And this raises the question, well, what can we do about it? How can we stop it? And my answer to that question is, we need to understand it first. Universities, governments, non-governmental organizations need to make it a priority to study dehumanization, to understand really its mechanics, what makes it work, what its machinery are, and on the basis of that understanding, perhaps we can do something about it. Bringing to bear the machinery of science on this phenomenon is our only real hope of dealing with it intelligently. It's our only real hope of creating a future that is less hideous than our past, and to make a future in which there are no more Hiroshimas, there are no more Auschwitzes, there are no more Rwandas. Is it possible? Could we do that? I don't know. It has never been tried. Thank you.